Hello and welcome to Gluten Watchers. I am your host, Rachel Toon, and on this episode, I would like to share with you the first step in transitioning to a gluten-free lifestyle. I have a book out. It's called Guts and Gluten, a step-by-step guide to gluten-free living. And in that book, I touch on 11 steps that I believe are essential in gluten-free living. They really help streamline and simplify that process. So I'm going to go over those steps over the next several episodes. And the first one today is educating yourself and understanding what is happening in your body. I believe if we have a better understanding of what's going on in our body, that we can identify when those symptoms come along that maybe we've been glutened, which means we've been exposed to gluten. We can be a testimony to others, maybe people that are experiencing symptoms, and say, hey, this is what happened to me and this is what's going on and what they've identified in my body the cause to be. And honestly, sometimes after we've been dealing with symptoms for such a long time, we almost feel like a hypochondriac. So we can say, hey, we're not losing our mind. We're not going crazy. I really do have something going on in my body. The first way I'm going to do that is by explaining the small intestines and a couple of its functions. Now, your small intestine is an organ in your body. It's actually the longest part of your digestive system. It's this long, narrow, tube-like structure, which it's about 20 feet long. It is located between your stomach and your small intestine. There's 3 parts to the small intestine, which I'm not going to get into. I just want to talk about it as a whole. And the first thing I want to discuss is its functions. Now, there are multiple functions that it has. I'm going to talk about 2. The first function is the responsibility it has to absorb the nutrients from the food that passes through it, from what we eat. Over 90% of our nutrients in the food that we eat are absorbed in the small intestine. 90%. And the way that it's done is there's these little hair-like structures called microvilli. They increase the surface area, they line the small intestine, and they allow a high percentage of nutrients to be absorbed, and they also disperse those nutrients throughout the body. So why is this important? What does it have to do with celiac disease and gluten sensitivity? Well, in celiac disease, it's a genetic disease, okay? It's an autoimmune disease as well. By that I mean, instead of your body going after the invader, your body starts attacking itself. So with a normal immune response, when an invader comes in, whether that's a virus, a bacteria, whether that's an allergen, a food allergen, your body is going to attack that invader if it's doing what it's supposed to. Well, in an autoimmune disease, when an invader comes in, with celiac disease, that would be gluten, your body, it doesn't attack the gluten. It goes after itself, and specifically the microvilli in your small intestine. So those microvilli, they become compromised, they get damaged, they have a lot of inflammation, they break off, and guess what happens? You can't absorb those nutrients anymore. So you start lacking those, and you become deficient in those nutrients. When I'm talking about nutrients, we have 27 different nutrients, vitamins and minerals in our body that we require to work at optimal level, to be able to function. And when we become deficient in those, we start experiencing symptoms, whether it's migraines, whether it's brain fog, whether it's unexplained anemia or infertility. I mean, the list goes on. There's over 300 different symptoms that are directly related to celiac disease. Now, the way that this differs with gluten sensitivity is we ingest gluten. After we ingest that gluten, our body sees it as an invader and it attacks that gluten. Now, we still have an immune response, but we aren't doing damage to our own body, at least. The thing you have to think about, though, is what does our life revolve around? It revolves around food. We're eating gluten all throughout the day, probably 3 meals a day, and our snacks. And we're constantly being exposed to it, which is why we get the symptoms. With gluten sensitivity, once you remove the gluten out of your diet, you are going to see those symptoms disappear rather quickly, and you're not going to have any long-term damage. With celiac disease, it's going to take some time. You should start seeing a difference within, a few weeks. Depending on how long it's taken for you to become diagnosed and how much damage has taken place, it could take months, even up to years, and some people could even do permanent damage depending on how long with not being diagnosed. Now, the average, it takes about 4 to 6 years for an individual to get diagnosed. I mean, you have to think, when you're going to a physician for a migraine, they're probably going to send you to a neurologist. And if you go to a physician for anemia, they're going to send you to a hematologist. And so it's going to take a long time to go to the path of maybe a gastroenterologist who will most likely diagnose you properly. All of this is because of gluten. And just to touch briefly, gluten, if you don't know, is a protein, and it's found in wheat, rye, and barley. They will list oats, and that's because oats get exposed to gluten-containing products, and so you get that cross-contamination. Now, the other function that I want to touch on with the small intestine is the role it plays for our immune system. We don't often think about our immune system being in our GI tract, but it is. Actually, 80% of our immune system is located in our digestive tract. We have bacteria, and by that I mean good bacteria, normal flora, that lives and it performs numerous roles for our entire body. We have to think about our immune system as a military. A military protects and it defends against foreign invaders. It also helps repair after the fight with those invaders. So those invaders can be viruses, the bad bacteria, maybe what you get from food poisoning. It can be food allergens. Anything it identifies as an enemy, it will cultivate an immune response. These good bacteria, they help receive the nutrients that the small intestine absorbs. They also help produce 2 vitamins, vitamin K and vitamin B12. Now, like I said, they do a whole lot more, but those are ones that are important that deal with celiac disease, keeping our immune system up with already having an autoimmune disorder, not being deficient in those, the vitamin K and the vitamin B12. The biggest thing is that we have to have a healthy digestive tract. And when we have celiac disease or gluten intolerance, we can't run at optimal level like we're supposed to. And in turn, we can start to experience a very broad range of symptoms. So how do we fix it? What do we do? Unfortunately, there's not this magic cure for you. The only treatment is a strict gluten-free lifestyle. The reason I say lifestyle is because a diet is something we go on and off of, but a lifestyle is a way of living. When you think about diet, I almost start cringing anytime I hear that word, because think about the first 3 letters in diet. D-I-E. Pretty much how we feel whenever we start on a diet, right? We do good for, a few days. Maybe we do good for a few months. Eventually, we either give up on it because it's too much for us, or we start seeing results and we get comfortable, or, events happen in our life that just take us off the path that we're on. Well, with celiac disease and gluten intolerance, you don't have an option to fall off the bandwagon. It has to be a full-fledged lifestyle change. Because if not, you're going to continue to do damage to your body. You're going to continue to experience symptoms. You can't cheat. There's not okay, I've been good Monday through Saturday and now Sunday I get to binge. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did sometimes. I also know that the gluten-free lifestyle can be overwhelming. It can be a lot to take in. Your whole life has been turned upside down from what you knew as your previous way of life, of eating. Our whole lives involve around food. We eat breakfast and we think, oh, okay, what am I going to make for lunch? And then we eat lunch and we think, oh, okay, now what's for dinner? So we have a lot of emotions that come with food. In that process of transitioning to a gluten-free lifestyle, I want to help with those emotions and those feelings that can be overwhelming to you. And I want to help you walk through this and the steps to help make this a very simple transition for you. I hope this has been an encouragement to you. Check out more of my episodes, click the like button and subscribe, comment below, and as always, I hope that I am putting life back into your lifestyle.